safety or that convincing someone that Bitcoin is safe is the problem. I think it's what do I use this for? Like it goes back to like, is it just digital gold? And I put this thing and I forget. Okay, done. But like it's just not it's not enough. Not enough for me. So showing use cases, and like you get out of the US, you get out of this bubble, you get out of Europe, you get down to Central America, South America, Africa. I've spent a lot of time in those continents, and people are using Bitcoin to buy coffee, and they're using it to buy dinner, and they're using it to pay vendors, and those vendors are going to restaurants that accept that Bitcoin, and there's tiny little circular economies happening, and that gives me a lot of hope. And they're not talking about the price. They're actually using it on a regular basis. What's happening on Nostr with Zaps is the largest at-scale implementation of internet magic money that we've been talking about for decades. That's actually paying for content, and it's working at scale. It's small scale, but it's still at scale. So these are things that like we need to study more and learn from, and like those are the reasons why people get in, and those are the reasons people will stay ultimately. So it's you have to feel it, and like we haven't given enough opportunity to actually feel the magic.
Happy Bitcoin Wednesday, freaks. It's your host, Odell, here for another Citadel Dispatch, the interactive live show focused on actual Bitcoin and freedom tech discussion. I am clicking over here. That intro was the one and only Jack Dorsey talking about getting people to feel the magic of Bitcoin on the Presidio Bitcoin podcast. I felt like it was a good overlap since Dorsey was recently on the show, and then Steve Lee was on the show. And Steve is heavily involved in Presidio Bitcoin. We talked about it 2 episodes ago. If you're listening on the podcast feeds, you may have noticed I dropped an episode with Governor Lee of Tennessee. It's a short and sweet one that was filmed live at Bitcoin Park. You should go check it out. It seems Zapstream is down again, which unfortunately seems to be a trend with Nostr and not being reliable. But we are working on it slow and steady, just got to grind it out while everyone else thinks we are crazy. Anyway, with all that said, I have good friend, return guest on the show, fellow board member at Opensats, founder of Bitcoin Plus Plus, Nifty, Lisa, whatever you'd like to call her. How's it going, Lisa?
Hey, Matt. It's great. Thanks for having me back on.
Yeah, thanks for joining. As the freaks can tell, I'm still obsessed with the live chat. So the live chat is coming in through YouTube right now. So if you have any questions, comments, just drop them in the live chat for us. Lisa, where do you want to get started? I know you have this. I guess the best place to get started, if people haven't listened to our last episode that we did together, which I think was like about a year ago, is what is Bitcoin Plus Plus? Why is it a focus of yours? Why should people care?
Yeah, that's a great question. Do we want to talk about the Dorsey clip first, or like, I mean, we can get into Bitcoin Plus Plus stuff, but
let's comment about the clip. What's your opinion?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting that like, so I mean, maybe this also kind of interests Bitcoin Plus Plus. Maybe I should do both, but I get to travel a lot for like conference stuff because I do comps, etc. And one thing that's always interesting is like talking to people about how they got into Bitcoin, especially devs, because I spend most of my time with Bitcoin developers. And it's always interesting how people come into and stay in Bitcoin because they found it for some utility reason. I'm thinking of a developer, like really cracked devs I've met in Chile. They were at Bitcoin Plus Plus in Brazil this February. Their team won. I don't think they got top prize, but they won one of the prizes for contributing to White Noise, which is a really cool Nostr project that Jeff is working on. And his family got into Bitcoin a while ago because it was how they could get Bitcoin from abroad into Chile. It's how they could get money into Chile easily, right? Without having to go through banks, without having to lose money through like Western Union, etc. So it's really interesting. Like, I think Jack's right in terms of people have to experience it. They have to really feel it and understand the value of it for themselves. And unless we get lots of people doing that and touching it and using it, and the best way to do that is as a medium of exchange, right? Yeah, I think he's right about, it might be not irrelevant.
Why is the best way as a medium of exchange?
Because that's the most tangible, I think, understanding of the value proposition. Because you can send it from one place to another without having to have an intermediary. Like if you do it correctly, it's like, oh, I just sent value anywhere I wanted in the fucking world. Like anywhere I wanted. Immediately, basically. Especially today, like let's go empty mempool. But it's yeah, so it is revolutionary in terms of sending value immediately. But then, like, okay, so I just started doing some physical therapy here in Austin for like, programmer head, neck, and shoulder problems. And the lady is amazing. She's incredible. And she's like, at the end of the session, she's like, oh, you can pay me on Venmo. And I'm like, I'm always like, oh, well, I can also pay you in Bitcoin if you want. And I get this dead look, and she's like, I don't even know what that is. And it's like, well, it's money. I can send it to you digitally. And she's just like, I'm like, no, okay, like I can send it with Venmo. So I don't know.
Look, I agree with you. I was curious of your opinion. I think it's a completely different user journey. Someone buying the BlackRock ETF versus receiving Bitcoin for the first time for either services, like a therapy session or something, or even just getting zaps from a shitpost, right? Like I think like the user journey of someone who posts a meme on Nostr and receives their first Bitcoin is completely different than someone that logs into Charles Schwab and buys the ETF. I want to drill into that particular situation because it is amazing to me how much of our economy runs on Venmo right now. It's kind of the de facto standard. What I do in that situation, and I know there's like a bunch of ride or dies that are going to be critical of me for this next commentary, but what I do is I onboard them to Strike because
Okay.
they're already on Venmo. Strike is like Bitcoin's Venmo. They're already KYC'd on Venmo. It's not like they're really making a big trade-off there, and they're able to easily sell it to their bank account at will, which kind of makes until we kind of have like a chicken and egg problem. Like until they can actually spend it on things that they want, it's not really real to them. It becomes real to them when they take the $100 you paid them and they, cash it in and pay rent with it or something. Then all of a sudden they're like, oh shit, like this is actually real money. My maid, we have like a housekeeper that comes once a week to clean up the house extra because we get backlogged, especially with the kid. And she, like, the way she knows the price of Bitcoin is like the price of her holdings in Strike. Like she doesn't think the price of Bitcoin is $86,000 or whatever. She thinks it's like $1,200 because it's whatever the amount of Bitcoin she still has in Strike is how she interacts with it. It's just interesting that user experience about how they enter it for the first time.
I mean, yeah, I like honestly, I still don't think we like nailed and maybe I need to do another like round of like trying out different wallets on mobile because the mobile wallet is really the way like I'm a mobile first person. I rarely use my desktop for things, right? Like finding a wallet that doesn't require KYC where I can just like say download this app, let me send you some sats and have it work. I don't know. I miss Phoenix. Shout out to Phoenix
Phoenix
Wallet.
is the shit. I was about to say.
I still have Phoenix on my phone. I like had to change my settings to Canada though to download it and then change it back to the US. So like, and I can't ask, like, you can't get people to do that to get it. So
If they were on
Anyways,
Android, they can do. You can have them sideload an APK, but that's probably also too much friction. I like. I mean, Zeus is decent. Zeus has the embedded node feature that
uh,
gives you like a Phoenix like similar experience. It's a little bit more trust minimized, which adds additional friction in terms of sync time and like has to. It does
mm,
pathfinding itself, so it's a little bit slower than Phoenix. Um, but it gets the job done to a degree. I've been obsessed with the Cashu ecosystem. Uh, there's Cashu.me by Kali,
do they
which
have
is
like
just a
an IS?
PWA.
Yeah, this is the thing though. I'm weird. I don't want to send people to a website. I'm like,
The
get an app.
iOS, the my favorite iOS app right now is Macadamia on
Okay.
the Nut theme. It's very clean. The only problem there is like, so then you onboard them to Mint, and what if they forget about it? Like they get a seed backup, but if the Mint disappears, then they just lose all
Mhm.
their Bitcoin. The tried and true Moon wallet with two U's still
I
gets the
know
job done.
it
Mempools are
does.
clear.
I know. I just like Moon is like to some extent signing them up for pain currently. Maybe they're changing their architecture,
Why?
but like, well, at some future point they're gonna hit pain and like
Will
unexpected
Mempools event?
fees.
Will we eventually have a sustained high fee market?
I'm gonna say yes. I can't
What's
imagine
your
why we
opinion
wouldn't.
on the What's your opinion on the current empty Mempools? People are panicking. They're freaking out. Bitcoin's dead.
I'm such a like maybe I'm an idiot, but I'm like, it's fine, guys. Like, chill out. Like, it's not. I don't understand what the panic is. Why are we panicking about this? If you're really like worried about it, go open some lightning channels. Like, I don't know.
I'm more concerned about the other side, to be honest. I think like this is just like a breath of fresh air that we still have more time to
Yeah.
not have a high fee market.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great time to experiment and build stuff and like, figure out new ways of using block space. Maybe this is like, moving to like a quantum resistant signature scheme provided like given the size estimates of those signatures will fix this problem. Like, guys, this is like a temporary problem. Like maybe I'm just like this is a temporary situation and it doesn't I don't know, it doesn't bother me. I'm like I mean, maybe it is a sign of a recession, at least in the United States. We're going through some stuff right now, with um there's been a lot of like weirdness happening in the gold markets, which has been fun to watch. So like, I don't know. Housing looks like it's about to fall off a cliff. Like the mempool's empty. Maybe this is just like recession vibes. Like,
Well, I mean, I think a lot of it is people moving to just the overwhelming majority of the market being on custodial stuff, whether that's
yeah.
ETFs or custodial wallets. But then the other piece has got to be there's very few people that actually transact Bitcoin. And a lot of us that do have been using Lightning. Like I think as much as
Yeah.
there's issues,
I mean, maybe
no solution's perfect, but
maybe Bitcoin is successfully scaled and like no one likes to hear that, but like,
it's at least like partially scaled, right? I mean, I send more Bitcoin payments than I ever have, and most of them aren't on chain.
right?
Uh,
Yeah, and I think that's like anecdotes like that are really cool and interesting. And I think there's a lot of people that move into space and say Bitcoin is lacking XYZ or Bitcoin can't scale or whatever. And it's like you look around and you're like, well, like maybe that is true on a long enough and like wide enough adoption thing, but in the short term, like just right now, like we have done the work over the last like 8 years, whatever, to make Lightning into like a fully functional payment rails alternative. And like, yeah, you can transact with Bitcoin off chain like today in a decentralized, like peer-to-peer way, without much of a centralized whatever. I don't know. Like maybe we did it. Is it like, am I too optimistic? Am I too
we
much of a
definitely didn't do it. No,
like
it's going to be like in a year or something. At some undetermined amount of time, people are going to be panicking that fees are too high. Uh, it will
Sure.
probably happen, and we probably won't get our shit fully in order until they do, because you kind of need the pressure.
Yeah.
I
I
mean,
mean, it's
there's
like people
another,
don't buy Bitcoin until
yeah,
it goes up too, right? Like,
yeah, that's true.
like
I do worry that, I mean, I actually don't, worry is the wrong word, but I do think that this cycle we haven't really seen um, like this bull run, we haven't really seen retail enter like real Bitcoin in a real way. Like there's suits buying ETFs. There's
We're finally
degens
getting
buying like
institutional. We're finally getting
MicroStrategy.
institutional adoption is happening right now. And this is the thing that I feel like people were talking about in 2018, 2019, like they were going to make it happen. I remember like Backed was getting set up, like there was all this talk of like institutional adoption is coming. We got to get ready for it. And they were all like over half a decade too early. I feel like we finally hit the point where institutional adoption is happening at a scale it's never happened before. And no one's happy about it. Like no one's rejoicing. Like everyone, like I feel like no one is like reporting on like, there's no like, oh, institutional adoption is like, I mean, there's like a little bit, but it's not, you know what I mean? Like, I feel like there's no like recognition that we've hit it. Like, this was a goal and people like were trying to do it ages ago and talking about it. And we're finally more at that than we've ever been. And it's like pretty quiet. Like, I feel like we don't celebrate our successes enough as a Bitcoin industry. We've managed to scale like the main chain into like the most decentralized payment network known to mankind, which is Lightning. Institutional adoption is finally arriving visa like through, the administration change has been a big part of that. I think Sailor has also been a huge driver behind showing people how that can be done. There's more like startups and like businesses launching IPOing that like brag about having a Bitcoin balance sheet. Like MetaPlanet just launched however long ago. That's like the Japanese basically MicroStrategy. We're talking about getting a strategic Bitcoin reserve, like, and yet no one seemed happy. Like, no one feel like it, like all these like great things that we've talked about saying and wanting that we like excited about happening. And I just feel like, I don't know. And I'm looking at this comment about people getting bit access. Like, more people are getting into home mining today than have been
That's
in
really cool.
like in ever. And like I just like I feel like people just like still aren't satisfied. And I'm like, is that just like price? Are we in the price doldrums? Or people just sad we're not over 100K still? Like where is the celebratory energy? Or is this like, oh, America's in a recession and so there's just this like strange like discomfort with things lately. We can't be happy because we're stressed. But like I don't know, I think there's a lot of cool stuff happening in Bitcoin.
Let's fucking go. I agree. Okay, so I mean, let's get back to the original question, which is what is Bitcoin plus plus, and why do you
Bitcoin plus
focus so much
plus.
time and energy on it when we're already winning so hard?
Yeah, well, Bitcoin Plus Plus is like, our tagline is like Frontier of Bitcoin. It is the like largest Bitcoin technical conference series in Bitcoin. We do technical conferences for Bitcoiners. So I'm a dev. I grew up in dev going to technical conferences and wanted to make a really great one to bring all my friends in Bitcoin who are devs together to share what they're working on. Get cross-pollination of ideas, have really good discussions about what are we building, why are we building it, what still is left to be built, what we accomplished as a dev community. Kind of a cool way to showcase like what teams and people are working on stuff. It started in Austin in 2022. We're about to have our fourth event here in Austin. It's going to be, I think, is this going to be the ninth ever Bitcoin Plus Plus, almost in double digits of conferences in less than 3.5 years. Um, we're international. We just had our first Brazil event in February, which was great. We do different themes at every event. So maybe I'm like getting a little off topic, but
You're good.
yeah. Um, yeah, so Bitcoin Plus Plus is really, my attempt to get people excited about what's happening in Bitcoin. And um sorry, I get distracted by these comments. What are you talking about? Everyone is
I
spreading
mean,
for
I
MicroStrategy.
talk, since you brought up the comment, I mean, I kind of agree with Eastside Tony that what he's saying in the comments is that, I mean, people are really like, especially on X, like MicroStrategy is just,
All anyone
there is a
wants to talk
lot of
about.
excitement about MicroStrategy.
Yeah, but that's like okay, so but, I mean like look, Bitcoin is big tent, right? And I think what we hear about and what people focus on and a lot of the like energy in Bitcoin is around the stock to flow like or just even ETFs or
Or
what is
price
Sailor
stuff.
doing, price stuff, but also like who owns it. It's like the who's who of Bitcoin owners, right? Like what is Mr. Sailor doing today? Like when is the government gonna buy my bags or someone else's bags, etc. And that's like fine, but that's a really different ecosystem and a really different audience than all the nerds that I want to stay interested and focused on Bitcoin. Because I'm thinking about Bitcoin from maintenance and like as a software project, right? And there's like as we add new projects like the Ecash stuff, as we add new stuff like Fedi with I mean Fedi's in there. They've got um all the lightning, like there's tons of lightning implementations, the code footprint of what needs to be maintained to keep and like infrastructure of nodes being run. It's a big decentralized system, right? So we need like lots of people running nodes. We need more developers coming in finding Bitcoin really interesting and wanting to spend time working on projects here. So like and again, like this is why Bitcoin plus plus exists is like back in 2022, it was all doom and gloom about like, oh, all these top devs are being scared out because of the Craig Wright thing. Nothing cool is happening in Bitcoin. All the cool hot devs go to ETH, do smart contracts. It's like, okay, no, let's make a place where we can show one, there's really cool smart devs doing interesting hard technical problems here. And so, I still think like there's a lot of work that we could do to showcase more of the cool technical stuff happening in Bitcoin. Conferences are one, but it's like, okay, there's probably more I could do about even talking about what gets shown at the event. So like each of our conferences is a theme, and one of the reasons that we do that is to try and shine a light on the cool, interesting aspects of Bitcoin devs. Because we want new smart devs coming into the space, finding like-minded people. That's like a big one, and getting nerd sniped, if I'm going to be honest, to continue working and find a project that scratches whatever itch they've got for the event. So yeah, that's like yeah, so that's Bitcoin plus plus. It's like really focused on the dev market and the dev market wider than just like who's in Bitcoin today. Which I mean, of course, like finding all the amazing people that are devs, nerds that are working on Bitcoin technically, keeping them happy, keeping them feeling connected to the community by bringing them together. And then also, how do we like get more cool, fun, very brilliant devs to come and work on Bitcoin as an open source project if you're not bringing them in and having them meet the community that way. So yeah, that's the project really. At least the like broad goal.
Well, I mean, as Bitcoin grows, it makes sense to me that the bull case for Bitcoin is that every person on Earth is a Bitcoiner. So as Bitcoin grows, it makes sense that the community will have like a bunch of sub communities. There's no just one overarching Bitcoin community. And we used to be more aligned and more just we were smaller. So we were smaller, so we agreed on a lot of things. Now you have all these different subsets. You have people that are just like obsessed with MSTR. You have suits that are like doing ETF stuff. And then you have people that are focused on self-custody, people that are focused on mining, open source mining. Then you have the developer community. One thing I've noticed is because of that disconnect, and particularly of how things get highlighted on social, like where the attention is, I've noticed that there is some almost increased burnout among developers that are doing a lot of the hard work behind the scenes, and maybe they feel like they're not getting the recognition, or they feel like they feel like the priorities are in the wrong place. How do you think about developer burnout, and how do you think about kind of this idea of almost I like to call it like replacement rate? Not that we want to necessarily replace developers, but like as they move on to other things, having talented people come in and kind of fill their roles. How do you think about those like twin challenges?
I think that's definitely a difficult thing. Um, One thing about developers, and I kind of learned this from working with Rusty Russell, who had a long, illustrious career in Linux open source before moving over to Bitcoin in the early teens. Um, and one of the things that you kind of just notice, especially the way he handles new people coming in to work on Core Lightning, for example, which is a very huge, I would think probably one of the honestly best architected and maintained projects in Bitcoin outside of like Bitcoin Core. And one of the things about the way that he handles people coming in is, when new developers show up to work on projects, they need support from existing projects in terms of helping them figure out what they're interested in working on and where like every dev has something different that's going to get them interested and excited. And one of the best things that you can do as a project maintainer or even like in open source is encouraging them to keep digging at whatever interests them the most. And is that going to be what someone else is currently maintaining? Maybe. Is that going to be like something that we haven't thought of before? Maybe. And integrating, kind of all those, especially if it's like open source project where people are giving their time and energy to contribute to something like an open source in their free time or whatever, um, letting people like, get recognition for what they're working on, and like bringing and showcasing like the kinds of contributions that each person brings to the projects, is really kind of where things like Bitcoin plus plus, I think, start playing a role because you get to say, hey, come talk about what you're interested in. You're new to the space, but you're contributing to XYZ. Come to Bitcoin plus plus, talk about what you're working on, get recognition for your contributions on a public platform in a way, in a real, what do you call it, audience of your peers. Like these are the other smart people, devs that are working in Bitcoin. And gives them, I think, like a real opportunity to make a name for themselves. Because like Bitcoin as a dev, like, if you're a dev working on open source Bitcoin, it's not like working at a startup where you're getting equity in a company that maybe, like there's less lottery tickets that you're getting handed out. And people talk about Bitcoin as a price like hitting a curve and like really going to take off in the next, maybe 5, 10, 20 years, whatever. But is that going to compare to the upside on being able to get startup stock in a like new onboarding like AI company? Probably not, right? So one of the few things that we can give devs is recognition and a name and legacy and letting them know they're working on infrastructure that's going to be around for a long time. And that's where I like to think that, conferences and what we're doing at Bitcoin plus plus is such an important contribution.
Do you do you not think that well, at least for the subset of devs that are able to get open source grants, whether that's from Opensats or HRF or Brink that are paid in Bitcoin, it's kind of like equity, right? It's almost better than equity. You actually have liquidity.
True. But I mean, the amount of money that Opensats has been giving out in grants has been non-competitive with
Right.
going to
I
work at a
agree.
startup. So like a startup, you're getting cash as well as equity usually, right? So it's like, I mean,
I
you
guess
could
it
go work
depends.
somewhere.
If it's a
You
hot
could go
AI startup.
you could go work somewhere else and get paid better money and buy Bitcoin with it and probably be better off than working on open source. It has to be something you want to do in a community you want to contribute
Yeah,
to.
I
And
agree.
how are you supposed to like find the community you want to contribute to if you don't know where to like find them?
Yeah. So do you think like is that one of the core problems you're trying to I don't want to say solve, but mitigate is like this idea, not this idea of burn. I mean, the burnout is real, correct?
Burnout is real, but I think I find that people who come to conferences tend to be, I think it helps with burnout because it's fun and it's invigorating and there's new ideas and maybe you were feeling like the project, like why was I working on this project, no one cares. It's like, no, here's all the cool people are excited about what you're working on and maybe some people want to help you, like Bitcoin plus plus has like so many cool, I want to say user stories or stories of devs that have come through and like completely changed their career path or trajectory because they came to an event and met people and started working on a project. Or a good example is, Jeff Gardner has been working on this really awesome new protocol project for Noster for building in a really awesome, um, basically like chat messaging app. And he went from being basically a sole contributor on this project to Bitcoin plus plus in Florianopolis in February. I think he has a team of like 5 or 6 people now contributing regularly, and they're all like
That's awesome.
from all over the world, right? So I
To
don't,
be clear, this project is like it's like Signal but on Nostr.
yeah, yeah, very similar, exactly. I mean, I can't wait for him to launch it. I want to move to something that's not Telegram or Signal.
No,
Um,
it'd be absolutely massive.
It'd be huge. And it's cool to like be able to watch like real network effects happen in person through these events. And we do them all over the world because Bitcoin is global and distributed. And it's really great to be able to get devs, that cross pollination across ponds, et cetera, is hard to do. If every Bitcoin dev conference happened in the United States, then we wouldn't really be building the right that we
Right.
wouldn't really be doing like the dev community a service as much as we are by having a like consistent interface of conferences that you know, it's really fun because I can talk devs from places that maybe would never go to Brazil into coming to Brazil and meeting the Latin American community and all the amazing talent that places like Vincium and Libreria de Satoshi are churning out down there, like new devs with really
Yeah.
amazing technical skills who want to contribute in a big way, maybe are already contributing in a big way, and getting them plugged in and making contacts to devs from Europe and the United States and maybe even like Asia. Like we had someone fly in from Taipei last year to our Buenos Aires conference. So yeah, I don't know. It's cool.
So
Stuff.
Florianopolis, Brazil, that was the most recent event, right?
It is. It was. Yeah.
So like break it down for like how many people were there? How many were already Bitcoin developers? How many weren't Bitcoin developers yet? How
Mhm.
many were foreigners? How many were actually local Brazilians? Like, just give me like high level. I'm kind of curious.
No, these are great questions. We had just about 200 people there. I am so bad at collecting data, which is probably part of the reason why I feel like, people don't know as much about Bitcoin plus plus because I'm such a like don't track, don't ask, don't tell. But I would bet that maybe half of that was local Brazilians and maybe another 20 to 30 were from the wider Latin American ecosystem. So Argentina, Chile, do we have anyone from Mexico? Maybe. We had a good chunk of people that came from the Bitcoin design industry, which was really cool to see. So they had a bunch of designers. I would say probably 60% were already into Bitcoin as developers, and the rest were new or had just come out of the Vincium Bitcoin Developer Launchpad, which they just did for the first time last basically like November. They started it. So it was, it's like a really good mix of people that are newer in their career, like people that are experienced devs looking to get into new Bitcoin projects, a lot of open source devs that are working on projects that maybe are looking for new contributors. So we had like a good presentation from Mostro, which is a Buenos Aires based open source project trying to build a peer-to-peer marketplace for exchange on Nostr. Yeah, it's cool stuff. It's like
So for contrast, that's awesome. By the way, I think I mean that breakdown is kind of fascinating to me. And it's good that, I mean, I love how much like local attention happens as a result of these events being international. So for context, you had one in Berlin that was Cashew focused. Was that this fall or last fall?
it was in October, so is that
Like
like
the
6
October
months
that
ago
just
now?
passed, right?
Yeah.
All my timelines are just so melded together at this point. I was bummed to miss that one. I think that was probably one of my biggest FOMO misses event
Yes.
wise in a
Yeah.
while. So compare and contrast the breakdown of that one compared to Florianopolis.
Now I'm like really wishing I had numbers because I'm like,
No,
bro, that
just
was
give us
6 months
estimates, high
ago. It
level.
was like,
I'm glad you don't track.
like, I think it was probably we had about 200 people again. So most of our events are around 200.
Right.
That's
I
like
like that
good size
size.
event for us.
Intimate.
It's a great conference. Like, everyone has such a good time too. Not to like, yeah. So we had about 200 people. I think it's like about the same. Like probably about half are from Germany locally. There's an amazing, I love doing Bitcoin conferences in Berlin. It feels like a really important place to continue having Bitcoin dev conferences because of how many developers are there that care about privacy and Bitcoin. Well, maybe not all as much into Bitcoin, but there's just such a great cypherpunk
What is there a lot of
vibe.
crypto stuff? There's a lot of crypto stuff over there, right?
I don't think there's as much crypto stuff. I think it's a lot of more like I think there's just more interesting privacy projects that like come out of there. So I feel like, and maybe I'm making this up, like I feel like there's a good number of Tor devs that were like famously in and around Lynn. So it's more just cypherpunk decentralized, like, stick it to the man. We're gonna
Right.
do our own self-hosting, really into like maybe it's more just open source community in Berlin feels really strong. And that's one that I want to continue to like have a presence in that community, so to speak. So we'll be back in Berlin this October again, 2nd to 4th, back in the
Oh
same
shit.
venue. This year we're talking about Lightning and programmable payments instead of Ecash, but Kelly is going to be there, and we're definitely going to be having hopefully some Ecash talks happening. I
And
think there's going to be
Berlin was where the original Lightning conference happened back in the day,
yeah,
right? Like
exactly.
2019 or whatever.
Yeah, I'm trying to bring the Lightning conference back. I've been joking this is going to be the first Lightning plus plus. We're going to like do Lightning conference 2.0. I've been talking to the LDK team. It sounds like a bunch of them are going to be there for it. Trying to talk the Albi people, I think are going to be there. I was talking to one of their teammates today about it. So hopefully they'll have a big presence. Working on trying to get like devs from Strategy, which is Michael Saylor's big organization. They've got a lot of like non-Bitcoin devs that work on their core business, which is not the part of holding Bitcoin. So it's just like trying to get,
I mean,
we've
I would
got
argue that holding Bitcoin is probably the core business now, but
yeah, but the number of people that they employ for that particular part is a very small percent, I think, of their total headcount, and a lot of their headcount are developers. They just don't work on Bitcoin things. So talking
imagine
to them
being a
about
developer at Strategy and not working on Bitcoin things and just completely. I mean, you want to talk about their salaries are probably good, but that would burn me out.
yeah, and I think they've got a lot of yeah, so I think they've got a decent number of people of like headquarters over in Europe. So it's like, okay, this is the amazing thing I think about Bitcoin plus plus being so international. It's like, cool. How do we and like, traveling's expensive. So a nice thing about having Bitcoin plus plus all over the world is that hopefully there's one close enough to where these devs are anywhere in the world that you can go to a Bitcoin plus plus every year, and you won't break the bank to buy a flight to the US or whatever, have to worry about visas, etc. You can just show up. So
Right.
that's one
Yeah.
of the
I
things.
mean, if I was, I'm very grateful I'm American and there's no other place I would raise my family. But if I was not American, particularly if I was working on, any kind of freedom focused open source software, I probably would not want to come to the US. I would probably just skip any events that were here. Um, Before I
Yeah.
forget, and I'm not trying to get you in trouble because hopefully you can get a bunch of strategy developers to participate. There was some autist on the internet, which like don't hold me to it, didn't verify my source, that said like all of MicroStrategy's offices internationally are like a couple blocks away from wherever the intelligence agencies are. So like
DC
literally they have
or
like 20 countries or something.
wait, sorry, I missed that. Could you say it like again? I like
They have like offices in 20 countries and it's always just like a couple blocks from wherever like their CIA is.
oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, I think all the offices are public, so I don't know. Leave it to the
I,
autist to
I wonder
connect the
if
dots.
maybe some of the strategy they're helping with is aren't they like a data analytics firm? Maybe they have
I think they've
contracts
done a
with.
lot of government contracts. Yeah.
Yeah, well then maybe interesting.
That's a lot of money in it.
Part
Okay,
of
so
me is like, what does that
Berlin.
mean? Yeah. Yeah, we've got our next event is the Mempool one. So we're talking about
Yeah,
Mempools and
that's Austin,
transactions.
right?
It's gonna be in Austin. It's Austin,
Okay.
May 7th to 9th.
So
You should come
mempools.
down.
What are we talking about mempools? That
All
how
the
to fill
stuff.
them?
Yeah,
Transaction propagation.
it's
Like
I'm getting together, a group of concerned Bitcoiners to talk about how we can fill the mempool again. No, I'm kidding. We're hosting an emergency meeting, so all Bitcoiners that are worried and concerned about mempools should come to Austin May 7th to 9th, and we will have a strategy session hosted by Strategy, JK, to talk about what we can do with the mempool. No, so it's I've been talking to a lot of people who are there's been a lot of changes to how mempool stuff works. I think there's also been I think we see a lot of contention over policies in the mempool over the last year
yeah,
plus. Um, Also, as a Lightning girly, there's been a lot of talk in Lightning Land about how do we get transactions into blocks with certain guarantees. And Instagibbs, who used to work on Core Lightning and is now working on uh, Instagibbs, who's now working at Spiral on Bitcoin Core stuff, specifically around this problem. He got nerd sniped while working on Lightning of like, how do we get transactions into blocks with minimum amount of griefing? So they've done a lot of work over the last, I want to say, almost 3 years on Bitcoin Core, package relays coming through. Peter Willow's working on a new mempool design called Cluster Mempools, which I don't think gets enough interest. Like, that's going to be incredibly huge for block building, and I honestly don't think that there's enough. Um, there hasn't been enough like conversation about it, I think. So, anyways, I'm getting all these people together. I'm also inviting like Scott 9000 is going to be there. The solo
Awesome.
Satoshi guys with the BitAct stuff are coming. We've got Rob Warren, who's done some really interesting writing. He has a book out about miner incentives. I'm hoping it's just like a really good opportunity for people that have been working in the space around mining incentives. How do we get transactions from the users into blocks? How do we do it in a way with like certain guarantees? And maybe in a way that like, yeah, it keeps the mempool full. Hunter Beast is going to be there. I don't think we've announced him yet, talking about quantum resistance, which will be really interesting because like all of the signatures for those are huge, right? So that definitely has implications on terms of like what kinds of transactions we can get into blocks if every transaction's huge. Anyway, so it's just like, okay, here's all the changes that have happened in the mempool or coming. Here's all the like pool designs that people are working on. We're gonna have Braid Pool there. We're gonna have people talking about Stratum V2. We're gonna have Datum, which is Ocean's protocol. There, Jason's gonna come give a really good deep dive on it, I think. Luke, I was just talking to Luke Dasher earlier today, who's great. I'm really excited to have him coming. He's gonna talk about mempool policy. Yeah. Anyway, so it's
That's
like okay,
awesome.
there's a lot to talk about here.
And you have a
And
good mining intro too into that. Is this going to be like basically the first mining Bitcoin plus plus to a degree?
yeah, basically, and awesome. Where better to do it than in Texas? Like, aren't we one of the biggest? I don't know stat. Again, me and like
You
not
are.
knowing stats,
It's
but
true.
we're one of the biggest miners in the U.S. It's also the same week as the Texas Energy and Mining Summit, which is targeted at, I think, a little bit different audience. It's more power
It's being thrown by
providers.
us.
Yeah, okay, us being Bitcoin Park, right?
Correct.
Yeah, okay.
Well, because now
um,
we have Bitcoin Park Austin.
Exactly. Yeah. So
We're
Bitcoin Park
spread.
Austin, super excited. Bitcoin Park is in Austin now. The Tennessee invasion is complete. No, but um, we're excited to have like there's going to be a lot of people in town for that event, and then we're also going to have hopefully all these devs, engineers, protocol designers. How do miners get paid? Like, how are we getting transactions into
That's awesome.
blocks? Yeah, so I'm super excited about it. I know I've been chitty chatting about it for
Well,
a
like
bit, but
historically, so our energy and mining summit, um, which we just did we've annually do it in Nashville, and so that conversation that I put on the feeds with Governor Lee, Tennessee Governor Lee, was at the National Energy and Mining Summit in January. Um, and historically, like it's more like miner operation focused.
yeah.
So this is actually like really, really very complimentary because the most of the mining conversations that will be happening at Bitcoin Plus Plus will be a little bit more protocol driven and developer driven and how we handle that side. So it works really well together.
I think so, yeah. And I mean, like, there's a lot of things. I mean, I think mining decentralization is one of the biggest topics in Bitcoin. Biggest like centralization risks
Yeah,
is
how do you
who's
feel
building
about
block
that?
templates. I don't feel good about it right now. I'm like really excited about getting more people doing home mining, but yeah, I don't know. I think it's still one of those things I need to like get caught up on what current pool designs are and like how Stratum V2 versus Datum work and there's a lot of really terrible like edge cases. I mean, I think I was one of the first people to kind of start calling this out on the mailing list like 4 or 5 years ago, where like, yo, bro, like mempool itself is obsolete. Like we don't the mempool, like you don't really need it anymore because you can send your transaction to
No,
10
you
if you get your
did.
trans huh?
You really. Everyone was arguing about mempool policy, and then you were like, "What if we just remove the mempools?"
Yeah.
And you really just like blew up the whole conversation, and in a
Yeah.
thought provoking way.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm like, bro, we don't even need the mempool. Just send
I
it
think
to
that was a
10
horrible idea,
people.
by the way. But
Everyone keeps
you know,
telling me this, and I'm
still
like,
respect
look,
you.
look, it's not like it wasn't an. I think this is the thing. I never did like a follow up post to it. It wasn't a serious idea. It was like a thought experiment. It's like, dude,
Right.
we legitimately can like you could remove the mempool today and still get your transaction mined by sending it to all of 10 people. The only thing is we
Right.
don't know how to find those 10 people. So if you build a registry where those 10 people are and you just send it, and those 10 people is like the top 10 mining pool mempools, you
No,
literally
and there's
only
a
need to
bunch
send
of
it to
out of
those.
band transaction relay that's happening already. Which,
Since then, it's
yeah,
only become like more of a thing because there's things that people who are transacting want to do that they literally cannot do with existing protocol. A really good example of this is Mempool Transaction Accelerator. People want to rebid and pay more on a transaction that they've already sent, and there's nothing in the existing Bitcoin protocol that lets you do that in like a how would I call it, like unrestricted way. And so it's like, okay, like there is an action that users and consumers
right.
wanna take, and there's no way to do it. So if someone's offering like a private way of doing it, the only problem is that there's like really big downsides to private relays and
And like
out of
censorship.
band fee payments. Well, the real risk is like for people running Lightning nodes like myself, who your Lightning node needs to know how much to pay to get a transaction into the next like
Yep.
10 blocks, right? If the data of what is being paid to get into the next 10 blocks isn't public because it's being paid as an out of band fee, so it's no longer reflected in fees paid inside of the
Yeah.
block, all of a sudden your lightning node is like has a completely huge like you have like, suddenly you have this like risk of losing funds because you can't get transactions mined in a way because you don't have there is no longer a public price feed of block space auction
Yeah.
data, and because you don't have that basically it takes public information about what it costs to get into a block and makes it private, and as soon as you have a private data feed then you have to pay someone to get it basically. So it creates all these like negative incentives around centralization of transaction relay, and that like, oh, the only way that I can get this transaction into a block is either by paying someone to find out how much to pay for it or by putting it out there and then paying someone later to bump it up because I can't do it through the existing protocol. So I don't know,
I
these are the
think you
things.
made a really good argument for why mempools exist or should
Yeah,
exist. Right.
exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
um
I mean, to
it's
be
like
fair to the mempool guys, people were already doing this like out of band transaction fee acceleration in a very, very opaque way. And it's still centralized, but they're trying to do it in the most transparent way possible so
the
that people
problem
can
is
still
you
do
can't
proper fee estimation. But it's
but you
centralized.
can't
It's 100% centralized and trusted.
and you can't publish the data like in the same data
Correct.
feed as the block. Like you can't, there's no way to make that data in a transaction that's already been included, if that makes sense. Like suddenly there's two pieces of information you need. One is all the transactions in a block, which right now also contain all the information about how much they paid to get
Right.
into the block. But now you also need a data feed or like some way to access information of what people are actually paying to get into blocks. And that is like extremely valuable information then.
Right. Like,
And
for
that's no longer
example,
public.
for like an actual practical example, let's actually pretend uh, mempools are busy and blocks are full. You might check, your node might look at a block and they might think a transaction's been confirmed at 2 sats per byte. But in reality, through mempools.space, they actually paid 45 sats per byte. And there's no way for your node to actually know that information and make a proper fee estimation. And that's where a lot of the problems lie.
Well, it's not even problems, it's just centralization risk.
Yeah.
And it really like destroys the ability of like people to have protocols like Lightning that are independent. Like so your Lightning node in theory, the only data you need to watch is new blocks coming in. But if this like threatens the ability to have a Lightning node that you have high assurance that the only data you need is new block info because you no longer can rely on your ability to get transactions mined in a timely manner.
Right.
Anyway, it's problematic,
Or even
but
like figure out how much you're supposed to pay.
yeah, it's just problematic to like
Um,
decentralization as well.
okay, I've decided that this show is just me asking your opinion on random things. What is your opinion What do you have an opinion on, back to mining centralization? Do you have an opinion on Stratum V2 versus Datum from Ocean?
No, but I want to. And this is why I am so excited that Jason of the Datum guy is coming and we're going to have some Stratum people, which I know Plebhash is coming. I don't know if he's giving, I don't know if I have any Stratum V2 talks. We should reach out to Pavlinex and convince him to come talk about Stratum V2
You
strategy.
can at least send
Um,
someone.
it would be, I mean, it would be amazing. I have one person, I have like 2 or 3 Stratum V2 devs coming to talk about their projects. But maybe I should set up like a Stratum versus Datum just like conversation. Because when you talk to the Datum, their guys, they're like, we looked at Stratum V2 and there were all these problems in it. Again, I'm just like, I haven't looked at it. So I'm really just like parroting back what they told me. And so they created their own protocol that they think solves a lot of the problems. I don't know what those problems are, but I really want to know, right? Like, what did Stratum V2 like get wrong? Why does Datum exist? I will say that I think Datum existing is really exciting and cool because one of the problems Stratum V2 is having was getting people to pay attention to it or adopt it or add it. I feel like as
Yep.
soon as you add I think this is kind of just the way that humans work. As soon as you add a competitor, all of a sudden you get more news and more like press and more coverage about it as an option. And I think that, I mean, I haven't been tracking. Maybe this is a good poll to like send out to people who are coming and participating, or just even mining companies in general, but being like, hey, like, what is your what do you call it? Like, I feel like awareness around Stratum V2 probably went up when Datum got launched. Mostly because it's
Yes.
like all of a sudden you have like this like you have a compare contrast situation, right? Whereas before it was just like Stratum V2 and what? Now it's like, oh, Stratum V2 or Datum, and you can like compare them and it's like 2 different things. And I think anytime that happens with a protocol, this is actually like it feels really hard when you're in it because it's like, oh no, I have a competitor. But all of a sudden it gives people an opportunity to talk about trade-offs, and it's like, well, why aren't you supporting one or the other versus why aren't you doing this thing that no one's really heard of, et cetera. So um, again, this is like totally outsider
I
baseball,
mean, I
whatever.
think
But
the biggest thing is that the Ocean guys were just like, fuck it, we're doing it live. And they just kind of shipped,
yeah,
and they had a pool, the pool had support for it. It was first class support. They
exactly.
were pushing it really hard. They offered fee incentives for people to choose it. It stopped being theoretical, right? It like a lot
Exactly.
of, and it tries to accomplish a lot of the same goals that Stratum V2 tries to accomplish, and they're kind of coming at it from technically a little bit different ways, but it's good to see both projects. And I think at the end of the day, what you actually look at is the majority of hash is either going through Bitmain proxies or Foundry, and neither are using Stratum V2 or Datum.
Right.
So let's just throw
Right.
as much shit as we can to see what sticks.
But I think you bring up a really good point about how Ocean had distribution, so to speak, and that they run a mining pool. And so they could develop a protocol and immediately distribute it to users via their like infrastructure of having a pool. Distribution of your software and your protocol is such a huge, I think, and this is like, I think your people are going to start seeing this like in the vibe coding era, like distribution, like ability to get people to pay attention and
Yep.
run your project or your protocol is really going to become the limiting factor, I think, of adoption, or like really changing how the world works. So yeah, it's interesting. This
How
is
do you
fun.
think about, so this is actually kind of an interesting case study, because so Datum was created and shipped by Ocean, which is a VC backed company. Well, not, I guess Dorsey would be upset with me
They're
calling
like,
him a VC, but it's a Dorsey backed for profit
they
entity.
had investors. They did like a seed
Yeah.
round, right? Like I think
Yeah.
they raised
But
like 6 million or something like that, right? Like
most of it was Jack. I mean, it's not public information, but from my intuition, most of it was Jack. And then Stratum V2 was heavily led through open source grants through Spiral, which
yes.
is Block. But it
Mm.
was very much like an open source nonprofit project. So how do you think about, in terms of efficiency or go to market or success on, in terms of for profit businesses that are building out open source stacks? Right, Datum's completely open source,
Yes. Okay.
versus projects that don't necessarily have some additional profit motive attached to it. Do you have an opinion on that?
Man, sustainability is really important. I say that as someone who runs a conference series that like really like, it's mostly been volunteer work-ish. Like, I mean, I get grants and stuff to help cover bills, whatever, but like running a project and not having a sustainable model for like how you're going to keep people working on it and maintaining it and promoting it and doing all the work that requires to get that distribution to actually make your project like be relevant over the long term, right? You need people running your software basically. um uh Sustainability is like a really hard thing in the open source world, and it's not just a Bitcoin industry problem. This is like global, right? Like anyone working on open source, it really comes, and it really comes from this really interesting place of like, I want my work to be public, I want like my software to be free, I want anyone to be able to open up and use it and tinker it and learn from it. um Doing that work and publishing it, like that is so different from how do we make this project sustainable? Where is the revenue coming from to continue like making this a longevity thing, right? I mean, if you look at the Catholic Church or like religion, I kind of feel like open source software is like kind of in the like public good sector, right? Which is, government or religion. Catholic Church convinced everyone to give them 10% of all the money they make, right? Tithing, as a way to continue building beautiful works of cathedrals, right? Like, what is it like? I feel like people talk about like, are you working on like cathedrals, right? Which is thousands of people spending years of their lives over the course of hundreds of years to build these immense stone structures that will last forever. Where does the money come from to make those happen? Well, it's everyone in the larger community giving 10% of the money that they make to that public work, right? And that's kind of how government works to some extent. Like we all give some portion of the money we're making to continue building the nation state, whatever that is, hand wave. But and like maybe this is a good place to start plugging like what Opensats is doing and donations and like I think that like even on the board of Opensats, I think we struggle with like how do we decide where to give money to people? Like, is this project like a sustainable project or is it an infrastructure one? I always lean on the more like, and I think like, board has different opinions. We all come from different places and different perspectives when we're evaluating where to spend the funds that we have. But it's always like, there's always going to be those infrastructure projects that have zero chance of being sustainable. Is Stratum V2 one of them? Maybe. Is that like maybe the best like long-term thing? I don't know. But that does mean that like as a community, and like Stratum V2 is just one example of like tons of projects in the space, like Bitcoin Core Lightning's another good example. The Cashu projects, that ecosystem, all of the guys that are working on those projects, and like Noster, like OpenSats is probably one of the biggest funds that is like supporting devs building infrastructure in the Noster ecosystem. Like, where does the money go to support open source? It's like, well, we don't have like a 10% tithing church. um and I mean, like maybe OpenSat should like start some sort of tithing program where you get like some sort of like Noster badge or something if you're like dedicating like 5-10% of your like nonprofit donations to OpenSats. But yeah, like yeah, I don't know. But I would like to see, I mean, I like to see OpenSat supporting projects that aren't sustainable by themselves in the long
Right.
run.
Well, I mean, there's two things there, right? Because
Yeah,
some projects
people need
just can't
money.
be some projects just can't be monetized, right? Um, it's
100%.
just it's
We
just
don't
like
want them
matter
to
of
be
fact,
monetized. Like you just
right?
like there's devs out there that are amazing at building things and they're amazing at contributing and they can find bugs and they can do maintenance at a level that is like god tier, right? Like just like out of this world incredible at their job, but they want to work on their job. They don't want to work on this. I mean, so I'm kind of like not transitioning, but over the last few years, like I went from being like I'm a developer, I'm working on open source projects to I'm trying to run a conference series and keep it sustainable over the long term, right? And all of a sudden, it's like, dude, these are like completely different jobs than writing code, maintaining software, fixing bugs for people. Like this switch to like, oh, how do I make this sustainable? This project of like getting devs together to talk about what they're building. Like that is like that's not easy, right? And it's like a completely different skill set. And I don't think it's fair to be like every single dev project out there needs to be able to have that skill set to bring money in. Like it's just a completely different thing. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it's once again, I think it's two different things, right? I think with Bitcoin now existing, it is, it's still very difficult to monetize an open source project, but easier than ever to monetize an open source project in certain situations. And as a result, they could have sustainable, independent funding. But then for everything else, they're kind of just always relying on donations. And you kind of mix two things together there with tithing, which is like kind of donation based, but also you'll go to hell, I guess, if you don't give the money. And then like taxes, which is like gun to your head, which I probably would put in a
It's
different
still going to
category.
hell if you don't give the money. I mean, like,
You're going to a
one's a little
physical
more
hell.
direct than the other. Yeah, like,
I do like the idea of social signaling for donations. I will say that's one of the things I'm most excited about with Noster, and that's not even OpenSats related. Like ideally, like the most beautiful situation would be people publish open source code and then people donate sats to them directly and get social credit.
never gonna happen though. But
It
that's
might happen.
I don't think it's going to happen at the scale that we need it to happen to keep these projects running and like maintain it. Like I know so many devs that don't want to post on social media. Like they just don't want and like posting and
Right.
having an audience and getting the distribution. Again, it goes back to distribution. And in this case, it's distribution of the work that you're doing and telling people like it's almost like personal PR. Like I don't want devs to have to turn into their own like personal relations experts in order to like keep working on their projects. Like that's
Well, I mean,
gonna work. Like,
look, it definitely won't work for everybody. I think it's just one, it's like an additional tool. And I think a decent example, which is not a perfect example because they've also gotten significant, very large donations, is something like Signal, which is a nonprofit, which is donation funded, which does incorporate a social signal. Like if you donate, they don't use Bitcoin, unfortunately, they use credit card. But if you donate, you get like the little badge, and the badge is different depending on how much you donate. So everyone that messages you
mm,
knows that you're better than them. And I think they get like a decent amount of donations that way. So I think there's something there. I mean, that would be the ideal. Like in my dream, like something like you wouldn't want a middleman like OpenSats. Like the dream would just be that you get donations
I mean,
directly without
like,
permission.
it's interesting. I mean, Signal's such an interesting case of like, why don't they just charge for their service, right? Like,
Right.
why are they even doing the donation thing at all? Like, I mean, I guess that makes them lose their nonprofit status or something, but
Well, I
it's like
think it's
not.
probably network effect, right? It's like people just like there's some of us that would pay for it, but we need to be able to message people, and it's hard to get the people that we want to message to actually buy an app.
Right, do like a thing. Telegram got me with their like upgrades on what do you call it? Telegram got me with their like you can't do fun emoji reactions unless you pay us like $30 a year. And like honestly, it took me like two tries of trying to get the right emoji before I was like, all right, fine, this is worth $30 a year to me. I
Interesting.
don't know. But that's like but that problem of like how do you get people to pay you money is such a
Right.
different problem from I'm gonna like find all the bugs in this particular open source thing, or I'm gonna
Right.
make sure that this is like maintained and shipping on a schedule, etc. I don't know.
But
Like it's just different
yeah.
skill
So we
sets.
started this tangent with Datum versus Stratum V2.
True.
Like Datum has this other model, which is yet to be seen if it's going to be successful in Ocean's particular case, but has been successful in open source historically, which is you release as open source software, and then you're monetizing services that are completely different than the open source software. Like Antpool or Foundry or
Mm,
whatever could go use Datum. Like Ocean isn't actually making money directly on Datum. They're
right.
making money on the mining pool service.
Right. Datum becomes a differentiator that speaks to their core values of decentralization and block building though,
Yeah.
right? So they're like they've got like a values and like a particular perspective on what makes for a like ethical moral, maybe moral is a better word for
Yeah.
the ocean perspective, um mining. And so a lot of the choices of what they're shipping is downstream of their morals around how Bitcoin mining and policy should be done. Um Again, so excited they're coming to Bitcoin Plus Plus. Everyone should come and talk to them about what they're doing
No, their team's
because
great. I love those guys.
they've got such a sick, like, I don't know, it's just I love people with particular like well thought through, I would call it like well justified positions that are maybe a little contrarian or outside the norm, and things that they're like building for and shipping and it's working for them. So I'm really hoping we get some amazing conversations
You will.
happening. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, to me, that's one of the things that like I'm just really fascinated by is sustainable open source businesses. Another good example that I like is Start9, which is like their full node package is completely open source. You can just install it on your own hardware, never pay them a dime. But then they make money on like the
It's not
pre-built hardware
sustainable.
because people want
Yeah.
convenience. They
It is
make
not
money on
sustainable.
premium services like customer service and stuff, right? Like
Yeah,
I
that's
think
true.
if someone is self-hosting their family photos, and like as a new father myself, like I would hate to lose my baby photos. Now maybe
Yeah.
I'm technically competent enough to back up photos and make sure I'm good, but if I'm going to self-host it and I'm not technically competent, what would you pay for that? I think you'd probably pay $100 a year in subscription revenue for like white glove customer service and premium services and whatnot.
But then it becomes the services and not the software, right? And so then you need a whole
But they're still
infrastructure for
maintaining an
like,
open source software stack without any grant funding, right?
yeah, but then it's not right, but then it's not just one dev doing contributions in the corner by themselves. It's a
Right.
team. And like then you run into skills of like how do you run and manage a team and keep everyone working in the same
Oh,
direction and
100%.
hiring. And like it's all of a sudden it's not just like it's not just the code, it's not just the dev, it's not just the work, it's all the other stuff that has to be done in order to do the work. Where the work is building, maintaining, and keeping like open source software like, developed.
Yeah, I know everyone has their favorite sailor quote, but my favorite sailor quote was the interview I did with him in Nashville, where he said, "Business is hard. It is.
It is hard.
It,
Business is
it is
hard.
definitely very difficult.
It's not an easy thing,
Everything
yeah.
looks easier from the sidelines." Okay, I have one more opinion I want to ask you. What's your opinion on the Cashew project? How do you think about Cashew?
Cashew is one of those things that I see people posting. I see Callie posting about occasionally. It always seems like there's cool stuff happening, but I don't personally like use it very much. I still like when I transact, I'm transacting on chain or with Lightning. I don't have like a Cashew wallet that I actively use and send balances to. Maybe that's because I haven't installed Macadamia Nut. I don't know.
It's
I
just
think that
macadamia.
Macadamia.
Or
So I'm gonna
macadamia,
go
I guess. Macadamia is like
macadamia.
academia. Yeah, macadamia.
Maca- Macadamia. So I think that's a little bit on me. Like I did do that whole conference on Ecash stuff. I get really excited about Ecash in terms of, people talk about one of the things that I spent is Cody Lowe's this brilliant engineer who's one of the first Base 58 students I ever had who went on to do really amazing things at Fedi and now works at Replit full time. Um,
Yeah,
and
he's a
Cody
superstar.
went Cody went through this thing where he was trying to make L402 work for AI agents. L402, for those who aren't familiar with it, is the ability to pay a Lightning invoice using HTTP codes to do payment requests, right? And so, like, we like have this like kind of fun thing where I like live code an L402 receptor for Core Lightning. Just like I don't know, just like live coding L402, and like as a process of doing it, you realize how much overhead it is to pay Lightning invoices
Yep.
and the way that like Bitcoin, Core Lightning, I should say, has this metering system with this thing called runes, not related to the ordinal stuff, like its own authentication thing. And basically, what you want is kind of want a way to like issue a token that has a budget on it. It's really hard to do with like the existing infrastructure in Core Lightning. So it's okay, like if I want to have agents that are doing work that are paying for services out there, right? Payment for services. Maybe this is how all the software engineers, open source engineers are going to get rich, is running services. Let me say that services word again. Like it's back to running service anyways. But maybe they're like, running an API that you're getting paid for or whatever. But all of your agents need a budget of cash, basically. They need cash budgets to be able to pay stuff. And L402 is great, but adding a budget to an L402 and all the like interchange that you get around invoices starts to become quite cumbersome. And like I saw it like working with Cody on this project, like directly, it was like, oh, like this doesn't really like this is like I don't want to say it doesn't work, but it's like there's some like real problems with this. So Ecash solves this because it is a budget. It is a number, it's a bearer asset. It's way easier in my mind to issue and keep and have agents using as like little things they can send. I think I need to go through like how these workflow works, but it's like just the number of round trips I think you have to do with Ecash is just a lot less than you have to do with Lightning. And so it reduces the friction from what I could see around that particular use case. I was like, okay, how are we gonna take AI agents, give them budgets denominated in the internet currency, which of course is Bitcoin, and set them loose upon the world to trade and source services, etc. And Ecash seems like a really great way to do that. Other really great, amazing thing about Ecash is how easy it is to have a mint denominated in something other than Bitcoin. So it's like so easy to spin up a mint and issue Ecash tokens that are denominated in something else. Kind of run into all the same you have all the same problems anywhere you're issuing assets that aren't
Right.
Bitcoin, where like, oh, what's the supply, et cetera, what's that backed by, hand wave? How
Yeah,
many
that's the
token
trade-off.
sizes a mint
The
how many
trade-off
tokens has the mint issued?
is trust in the mint is the trade-off. But once you take that trade-off, you're able to do an amazing amount of things in a super lightweight, offline, programmable way. It's fucking huge.
Trade-offs, but huge trade-off, big
I
trade-off
love
there,
cashew.
Um,
I'm super cashew pilled. Like ready to go. I've been feeding my son cashews recently just because I'm so excited about it. He loves
Cashew, not
cashews.
fatty though. Like you think cashew, like
Yeah, Fedi. I mean, I'm. Well, so to be clear, there's Fedi, the company, which by the way goes back to our previous conversation about building a business that is also trying to
that's
maintain an open source project, and then there's Fedimint, the open source project, and I think it's important to delineate. So then you have Fedimint, the open source project, and you have Cashu, the open source project, and the big difference, high level, is that with Fedimint you basically have a multi-sig mint, like a multi-sig custodian versus a single sig. And I think the Fedimint project rides or dies on how difficult it is to launch one of those Fedimints and launch that securely. And it did come up on my radar recently that they have like this new method that uses Nostr and Tor, and you can run it at home, and it doesn't rely on DNS like the previous setup relied on DNS. It was like people don't realize, because like you think about it in your head, you're like, oh well, it's multi-sig Cashu. No, it's like that federated portion makes everything way more difficult, and you need to have consensus between the different federation members. So as a result, Cashu just like is able to just ship really quick. It's way easier to run. It has way less moving pieces. But yeah, I mean, I think ideally the dream would be to reduce that trust and have some kind of federation there, or Cashu's trying to get there from like different directions, but like the Titanic approach, where like you have it in multiple mints and only one mint rugs you or something. But yeah, either way, like I don't really care. Calio trolls me that I say Ecash. Recently, I've been more excited because I just hedge my bets between Fedimint and Cashu. Recently, I've been more excited about Cashu than Fedimint, but all more
Are you
options, the
excited
better.
about it? Are you excited about it because of the number of devs that are like building in it? Like, are you excited about it because of the protocol? You think it's like a better bet? Like, where does
In
your excitement
in
come from? I guess I should say.
in my short lifetime, I've seen 3 open source projects that have massive viral organic developer interest, and it's been
Mm.
Bitcoin, Nostr, and Cashu. And like that's a measure. It's like I guess maybe it's not fully, I think it's pretty measurable KPI, right? Is that for all the faults of Nostr, one thing you have to give Nostr credit for is that it has this very bottom up, organics, grassroots developer interest. And same with Cashu. And it's hard to ignore that. And as a result, what you get is you get many different tools, you get many different ideas, you get this melting pot of talent kind of working on this thing that like shitcoins, crypto companies they would spend hundreds of millions of dollars and they can't manufacture it, right? Like if I'm going to use Nostr as the example again, like something like Farcaster, which is like the Ethereum Nostr competitor that has like tokens and pre-mines and shit. Like they can't get nearly the developer interest of Nostr, even though they say their daily active users is way higher, that they have all this money, all this other stuff. You just can't manufacture it.
I'm laughing because one of my friends is probably the biggest open source Farcaster dev right now. Like one of my old
You gotta,
BFFs is like
you gotta
basically,
get
but
them to
yeah,
Nostr.
he's he's invested in a different ecosystem, but yeah,
Fair enough.
but yeah, I know, but you're right. Like it is, yeah, man. How do you get devs interested in projects? And this is kind of like the whole Bitcoin plus plus thing is like, how do we
Right.
get more devs to Bitcoin plus plus? Like, how do we get more people to come in person and participate in these projects? And things like Ecash taking off is exciting because it means there are more devs in the ecosystem, even if they're working on different kinds of protocols. Yeah.
So one of my most people have different things they're proud of. One of the things I'm most proud of is when I first met, you mentioned Cody Lowe already. When I first met Cody Lowe, he said that Citadel Dispatch inspired him to start working on Bitcoin and focus on Bitcoin, which is insane because the dude is just incredibly talented, and I have massive imposter syndrome to inspire someone like that. But to that point, if there's a developer that not working in Bitcoin listening to this show, or someone who's thinking about getting into development, what advice do you have to them? Maybe they're thinking about getting an open source grant. Maybe they're thinking about going to Bitcoin plus plus. What's your piece of advice? Talk to them right now.
Yeah, this is a great question. I don't know. Find something. I think it's like the way I got into Bitcoin is I got nerd sniped, right? I read Mastering Bitcoin. I found a bug. I started investigating, and that became the way that I fell down the rabbit hole, right? Like technically, because it wasn't going to be for the macro stuff. It was always going to be because of the tech. Um, so I think like learning more about what's going on, like educate yourself, read Mastering Bitcoin, subscribe to Bitcoin Op Tech, though. Um, I don't know, do a Base 58 class. We've got some online classes on Udemy, which I continue to hear are just like life-changing for the people that do them. Most of the people that I know that have done Base 58 classes go on to do incredible things later. It's a little bit of a self-shill on the stuff that I've been doing.
So how
Check
do they
that
sign up
out.
for Base 58 classes? Your Base 58 classes?
Yeah, we're working on launching a new website, but it's base58.school. I'm not the only
Dot
classes we have.
school.
The only classes that we have
Okay.
available right now are online Udemy ones, and they're kind of hard to find on the website, which hopefully we'll have that fixed soon.
And
Some
they're
point in the
paid, right?
future. They're paid classes. Yeah, value for value, man. Like,
Can you?
I think
That's
like,
not value for value, but I respect
how
it.
is it
That's
not
fine.
value for value? Like, you get
Value for
value by
value is
paying for value.
you pay if you find value. Like people get to listen to Dispatch for free, and then if they find value, they can send payment
Mm,
afterwards.
Well,
There's
you
a
get
very
it
strict
like no,
definition
I
though.
don't think that's like what you're talking about is donations after the fact, right?
Yeah,
Like
that's
this was
value
like
for value.
getting payment for no, I thought value for value was like paying as you stream something. Like you get
No,
something
but
in
it's fine.
exchange
I
for
mean, you should charge for it. Can you pay in Bitcoin?
not currently. This is why we're working on
No.
the website update, is
Okay,
because
fair enough.
it's launched on Udemy. No, I mean I launched it on Udemy just to get it out, but
I
I'm
mean, do you
paying
think
too
is
much.
OnlyFans value for value?
I mean people pay for it, I'm assuming because they get value out of it.
But it's behind a paywall, right? So that's, I mean, that would be, Gigi would be going crazy right now, calling that
Just
value
because
for
you
value.
guys have like you guys have like redefined this value for value thing to like define something else. Like that's not my problem.
It's
Don't
definitely
make that
someone
my
paying
problem, man.
value for value. I agree.
You're getting value
Okay, that's
back
good.
and you pay
So,
money which causes value. So like how is that not
okay.
isn't that like all commerce though? Like you pay money to get value back.
Yeah, it's
Like
just capitalism. Um,
yeah,
we
it
just
is
rebranded
capitalism. And when we
capitalism.
talk about sustainability, and then people are like, "Where are you getting information about Bitcoin?" And it's like, well, like you want good stuff, you have to like. Seems reasonable to ask for people to pay for
Oh, I
stuff.
think it's completely reasonable. That wasn't my reservation. It was just I was just arguing semantics. I think you should charge, and I think you should charge for Bitcoin plus plus too. And I think other people should charge uh, for good content, and particularly education, because education, like, there's a real, people better themselves, and they can actually then go and live better lives as a result. Okay, so base58.school. I distracted this whole conversation. Base58.school. Bitcoin plus plus is coming up. How do
It
they
is
how do they sign up for Bitcoin plus plus?
BTC dev. Click on the
BTC
Austin
plus plus.
conference. We're running 5 other conferences this year, so you can see them all on the
Holy shit.
website.
Where else?
Um,
Hit us. Give us the full show.
Yeah, so we're doing Austin in May. It's all about Mempools and mining stuff, which we talked about. We're going to be in Riga right ahead of Bitcoin Baltic
Awesome.
Honey Badger, talking about privacy and how privacy keeps us free. I'm really excited. I think we're going to like some tour people are going to be there and trying to get Jeff from White Noise to come talk. Should be have like I think Yuval might be coming, who does some of the best stuff on privacy, coin join stuff. So it should be a really good conference on what does privacy and Bitcoin mean today. We'll be in Istanbul. It's the only one I don't have dates yet for, talking about ZKPs and like some of the more like, just gonna say it like shitcoinery L2 stuff, but that'll be in September. Kind of trying to shine a light on what people are trying to do using ZKPs and Opcat
Where's
on
that?
Bitcoin. Istanbul.
Okay.
So I don't have
Continue.
dates or venue yet. In Berlin, 2nd to 4th, we're going to be talking about Lightning and programmable payments. So hopefully first Lightning plus plus, and then in Taipei, we'll be in Taipei, have our first East Asia conference in December 15th to
Impressive.
17th, talking about sovereignty. So come hang out. To be good. Also, like if you want to talk and you've got a project that fits any of these things, you can go to btcpp.dev/talk and I'll have a form to fill out. We also have a volunteer form on the website if you want to volunteer, get a ticket, help us out with the event, grab some tickets. You can use the code PLEB to get 10% off any of the conferences that were happening this year. Yeah, come hang out. Come learn about some Bitcoin stuff. Come find a
Can you
conference
pay
near
for the
you.
events in Bitcoin?
Yes, you can pay for events in Bitcoin and you get a
Nice.
discount. So yeah, that's because yeah, but I wrote the checkout. Like I wrote the checkout for Bitcoin plus plus. I didn't write the checkout for
Right.
Udemy yet. So
Yeah, that's fair. I yeah, those are like, I don't know. Those are like the types of tooling that we need, is like Udemy for with Nostr and Bitcoin or whatever. I don't know. I'm just throwing
yeah,
shit out there. Before you leave, you mentioned the Riga event. I love that city. I love the conference, the main conference that
so
you're.
fun.
It's a good idea doing the overlap with existing stuff. I mean, people are already in town. But you
Yeah,
mentioned that one is focused on
yes,
privacy
sir.
and Bitcoin. Do you have any thoughts on the current state of using Bitcoin privately, or how that ecosystem looks right now?
It's not something I spent time on in a while. I'm like obviously a Lightning maxi. So, it's like if I want to transact privately, I use Lightning. It's still, in my opinion, best in class in terms of transacting privately. Like it was I mean, Lightning set out to fix a lot of the on-chain privacy problems, and I think it has largely succeeded. People will tell you otherwise, but don't believe them. No. Uh, um, what else? Yeah. So like there's a lot of stuff with silent payments, which Josie's been working on. I think Opensats has been working with him to try that out for some of the stuff that we're doing. And um, I don't know. I get less excited about, and like there's PayJoin, which is also like both of these are like
Right.
on-chain things. I think they're important projects and they're cool and like the interactive transaction construction stuff with like PayJoin is doing is all stuff that like I help pioneer on Lightning. So I don't know, like it's cool stuff. I just like on chain is not as exciting to me, I think, as like Lightning still is. But yeah, hopefully we'll have a really good conference where we get to hear about all these projects and updates and what people are working on, and hear from researchers like Yuval who are deeply embedded in the space about what's happening there. So I don't know, kind of that.
Fair enough. Well, I'm going to have Dan Gould. I think he's the maintainer of PayJoin Dev Kit on Dispatch next Friday.
Yeah. Cool.
1700 UTC freaks. You should consider joining us live. Nifty gave me the best tangent ever, or I don't know, whatever it's called. Nifty, thank you for joining us. Do you have any final thoughts for the freaks?
Come to Bitcoin++. Use code pleb, 10% off. See you there.
Love it. BTC++.dev. Thank you, Nifty.